Welcome back to the podcast. So, today's episode is how to optimize your recovery to maximize muscle growth, fat loss, or really any performance or body composition related goal. Because if you're not recovering properly, you're not going to make progress. No matter how hard you train in the gym, how much effort you're putting in, your body can't grow or adapt without recovering. So, by the end of this episode, you're going to have a clear understanding of how to optimize your recovery so you can see the best results from the effort you're already putting in your training to make the most progress you're capable of. So let's dial in your recovery. So, we're going to go over the recovery hierarchy from the not so important stuff to the most important stuff, and then talk about how we can optimize each of those so your recovery is quite literally as on point as it can be for your life, responsibilities, etc. So, we're going to touch on recovery tools, how nutrition plays a role, of course, stress, sleep, and then obviously rest. Then, lastly, how we can build resilience so we can actually not only recover faster, but be able to handle more stress and more demand placed on our body, which will only lead to better results. So, before we jump in, I want you to think of your body's recovery capacity like a bucket. Every stressor, whether it's from training, work, school, poor sleep, poor diet, emotional stress, somebody's yelling at you, pours into that bucket. This cumulative load is called the allostatic load, which is just a fancy way of saying the total stress your body is juggling at any given time. Now, if your bucket overflows, recovery stalls, performance drops, and you risk now you're overtraining or you could potentially get injured. So the key is to manage what you pour into that bucket and ensure you don't spill over. Each of us has a unique bucket size in terms of factors like genetics, our level of fitness, how experienced we are, lifestyle, which makes understanding and managing your personal stress load, your allostatic load, your recovery bucket so important for optimizing your recovery. So just to quickly recap, everybody has a bucket of recovery, let's say capacity, so that they have a bucket. Now, what you pour into that bucket determines your allostatic load. So let's say you're under financial stress, that's some water going in. Now you're training hard 5 times a week, that's some more water in. Now, somebody got in a car accident. You got in a car accident. I actually got in a car accident last week. Not ideal, but that was another stress. More water added into the bucket, and that's making up our allostatic load. So that's important to note before we get into the rest. Now, what are some recovery tools we can use to potentially improve the recovery process? I will say, though, these are often the things people first look to when they think about optimizing recovery, but they're more like the icing on the cake, definitely not the foundation or where you should place most of your effort. But let's start with the cold therapy, the cold plunge. If your Instagram feed looks anything like mine, you've definitely seen a ton of dudes hopping in cold plunges, women too. But the idea here is that cold therapy reduces inflammation, decreases the perception of pain, and minimizes the perception of fatigue as well. I will say the majority of the benefits I use it for is more cognitive related. It's increasing dopamine and just doing something voluntarily hard just makes stress in every aspect of your life, calms it down a little bit. So that all sounds great, but inflammation is specifically is part of the muscle growth process. So if you're hopping into the cold plunge right after your workout, you're actually doing yourself a very hard disservice. You're blunting your own muscle growth. So the key is timing. So I use it right when I wake up in the morning, far away from my training session. If you're going to do it in the afternoon, make sure you're at least 3-4 hours away. Avoid it post-workout at all costs, though, if muscle growth is your goal. There are situations where somebody may not, like fighters, for example, may not want to put on muscle but still build strength from their workout. That's when you could obviously use something like that. But then there's heat therapy. So we got things like saunas, hot baths, heating pads, which increase blood flow, reduce soreness, and promote relaxation by shifting your body into a parasympathetic state, the rest and digest or the recovery side of your autonomic nervous system. So if you enjoy heat therapy, it can definitely support recovery. But if you hate it, I wouldn't really bother because you're just creating more stress over something that's supposed to be relaxing, which completely defeats the purpose. I will say, though, that the sauna is highly beneficial. So if you could get in the sauna 3 to 5 times a week, you're really doing yourself a good deed in terms of your overall recovery and not only recovery, but health, reduced risk of all-cause mortality. Now, most of you are young listening to this, so that's not really something we're after. But in terms of the improvements in vascular networks as well, there's some research there. So definitely incorporate the sauna if you can. Then we have this contrast therapy, which is like you hop in the cold plunge, then you go in the sauna, and this creates like a blood pumping effect through vasoconstriction from the cold and then vasodilation from the heat, which is quite the hippie recovery tool, to be honest. I see this often in these high-end recovery places that you can go to where they'll have cold plunge sauna, and they're great, but I would save them for either rest days or deload week when you're not chasing muscle growth as a primary goal. Let's say you're in a muscle growth or gaining phase. Then there's compression therapy, which is like those boots that you see athletes wearing. These are actually very beneficial. They help with blood flow and lymphatic drainage, which can definitely improve recovery, especially if you're running, endurance athletes, anyone potentially in high volume training phases. Or another use case would be, let's say you're in a diet phase and you're doing, let's say, a lot of expenditure, like a lot of steps, very high step count, or a lot of cardio. You want an extra hedge to keep your legs fresh and not flat. These would be a great idea. Then there's obviously you got massage therapy, one of the best recovery tools, to be honest, but not because of the actual tissue work itself, it seems to be, but because it helps you fully relax and enter that, what I said before, that parasympathetic state. So you get to get very relaxed. I know anytime I have a massage, I get into like I'm almost like sleeping, like super, super relaxed. And that's the most beneficial state you could be in for recovery. So rather than the actual tissue work itself, which does do stuff in terms of recovery, if you have a good massage therapist, it's more the parasympathetic state it puts you in that really moves the needle in terms of recovery. Last on the list for the recovery tools, we've got foam rollers and Theraguns, which definitely do have some application for improving range of motion, but their effect on recovery itself is very minimal. And at the end of the day, recovery is far more about doing less rather than doing more. So absolutely, yes, you can do some of these as like sprinkle on top the icing on the cake, but the big pillars are what we're going to get into now. And if you nail these, you're covering 95% of your recovery in terms of improving that. The ones we just went through, those are like the top 5, maybe 10%, but I wouldn't waste your time on them if you're not going to be nailing what we're going to get into now. So first is nutrition, which obviously plays a massive role in not only recovery, but resilience and honestly just your ability to show up feeling your best every day. This is something that often gets overlooked because it doesn't sound as cool as some of the tools we just talked about, like hopping into cold plunge or contrast therapy. But if your nutrition isn't dialed in, those tools won't be doing much. Imagine like putting a band-aid on a broken leg. What is a band-aid going to do? So nutrition is the foundation. Now, resilience itself is a fascinating topic as well that ties into nutrition because at its core, resilience is about how well your body can handle stress and return back to a balanced state, or what we call homeostasis. So an easy way to think about this is like a dry fit shirt, one of those super tight ones. When you pull it, it snaps back into shape. Your body's kind of like that as well. And that speed at which it snaps back is a reflection of how resilient you are. Nutrition is a massive part of the process because it fuels the system in your body that are responsible for recovery. So without the right nutrients, your body can't rebuild, adapt, or bounce back optimally. That stretch and then boom, come back into place. So how does nutrition tie into resilience? So let's look at this from two perspectives: inside out and outside in. From the inside out, your body's resilience is a reflection of things like your hormone status, so your testosterone levels, basically every single hormone in your body, inflammation levels, immune health, and these are heavily influenced by what you eat. For example, chronic blood sugar levels measured by a marker called HbA1c are directly tied to how your body processes carbs. So if you're eating a ton of processed carbs and sugars in excess, you're setting yourself up for energy crashes and poor recovery. And then there's inflammation, another big one. High levels of inflammation, which can come from eating too many processed foods as well. Definitely slow down your recovery and make it much harder for your body to adapt to stress. Now, from the outside in, it's about how well your body handles the stress it's exposed to, whether that's an intense workout, boss yelling at you, school, or even environmental toxins. Nutrition almost acts as your defense mechanism in a way here, because a diet rich in antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals can give your body the tools it needs to counterbalance these stressors. So I quickly do want to talk about some of the specific biomarkers that I find really helpful to give you a real objective look at your recovery if you get your blood work, because that'll just give you an objective look at how well am I recovering. So there's the cortisol to DHEA ratio. This is a ratio of how well your body handles stress and how resilient you are. HbA1c, like we spoke about, which measures chronic blood sugar levels. Then there's P or C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation. If it's high, it can mean your body is in a chronic inflammatory state, which if you're very inflamed, it makes quite a bit harder to recover. So if you do your blood work done, those are some markers that can give you an insight into your recovery and resilience, which can then inform how much demand you put on your body via training, diet, like entering a deficit, things like that. So that's one way you could use blood work as a tool to inform your programming. So now back to nutrition. How can we use our diet to build resilience? Well, we need the following four things in our diet. We need a solid balance of macronutrients, protein for repairing and rebuilding muscle tissue, carbohydrates, your primary energy source, and then healthy fats, especially omega-3s play a massive role in reducing inflammation and supporting hormonal health as well. Next, we need micronutrients and antioxidants. I did a whole podcast on the importance of these, which I'll link below, but vitamins and minerals are beyond important for recovery. Not something people actually think about when they're eating. Magnesium, zinc, vitamin D, all crucial for immune function, stress regulation, and of course, muscle recovery. And then there's antioxidants like vitamin C, which combat oxidative stress, and a ton more. All to say, if you want good recovery, get your micronutrients in, not just your macros. Macros, yes, they'll dictate how you look and perform, but micronutrients are kind of like the base to that. They'll dictate how you feel, which will then in turns, are you going to perform better if you feel good? Then there's hydration, which literally impacts everything from muscle recovery itself to cognitive function to performance to recovery. So some general recommendations are half an ounce of water per pound of body weight is a good place to start, and around 3 to 5 grams of sodium and at least 4,700 milligrams of potassium are the recommendations to start with. And then adjust from there. Ideally, you want your pea light color, except in the morning, because there will be some dehydration from overnight. Then we have anti-inflammatory foods to help combat inflammation, like fatty fish, turmeric, which you can supplement with to keep inflammation in check, which will speed up recovery. So to optimize your recovery and create the best conditions for your body to withstand stress, train harder, recover faster as it pertains to the nutrition, follow those four. Macronutrients for energy and repair, micronutrients for cellular function, immune health, and anti-inflammatory benefits. And don't forget about hydration. You want to be optimally hydrated because that'll only help you perform, feel, and then recover better as well. Next, we cannot talk about optimizing recovery without addressing stress because, let's be real, everybody has some level of stress in their life. So first, we'll quickly touch on what stress really is, then how to measure it, and then what adds to our overall stress load. And we'll also paint a clear picture of what a healthy mental state looks like and then how to tackle some very common stressors that I found pretty helpful over the years. So at its core, stress is anything that disrupts your body's balance or what we call homeostasis. These disruptions stack up and create what's called the allostatic load, like I mentioned before. Again, the fancy term for just the total stress burden on your body that it's currently dealing with. So think about that, your recovery bucket, dumping all your stressors in with water. Think about that. That's your allostatic load. And the thing is that most people don't realize is that mental and emotional stressors contribute just as much, if not more, to that total load. So you may think training hard in the gym is going to, let's say, dump more water into that bucket than, let's say, an extreme life stressor, some relationship stress would as well. But it can be the same depending on how much that stressor is. So to understand stress better, we need to categorize it. Stressors generally fall into a few buckets. We got social stressors, like I just mentioned, like relationships, loneliness, or lacking a sense of community. Existential stress stems from feeling like you lack purpose or direction. Then just like emotional stress includes feelings like anger, fear, shame. Mental stress comes from decision fatigue, information overload, and maybe constant demands on your attention, just feeling overwhelmed. So what does a healthy mental state look like? What are we striving for? Not that we're going to be perfect, but what can we aim for? Well, it starts with emotional well-being, the ability to process and express emotions effectively, which journaling can be great. Then there's that sense of community, friendships, belonging. And then finally, there's a positive outlook. So keeping realistic yet optimistic perspective. And once you have that, when all those align, you're not only improving your recovery and performance, but you're also reducing that load of psychological stressors so you can handle more physical stress from your training and still be able to recover, because now we're not dumping water from our emotional stress into that bucket, so we can allocate more water into that bucket from our training and still be able to recover, which means more growth. So I know that all sounds great, but as we know, in reality, Stress is completely unavoidable. You will encounter it, but the way you respond to it is 100% within your control. Another side of stress management is intentional rest. For some, might be a hobby, watching Netflix, chilling, spending time with family, loved ones, friends, practicing mindfulness like breathing, meditation, whatever you have, whenever you have time really, and you intentionally spend fully relaxed is ideal. So if you can do maybe 2 or 3 sessions a day of just 5 minutes of just consciously being aware of your breath, even less, let's just say when you're cooking, when you're driving, those things will stack up and you'll definitely see notice. I've seen a difference in my HRV just trying to consciously do that whenever I'm cooking. It's a perfect time. Just, okay, let me focus on my breath. And my HRV has gone up quite significantly since doing that. So I would give those a try. And then, of course, we do have supplements that can also help. Adaptogens like rhodiola or ashwagandha are great. For rhodiola, modulating cortisol. So if it's too high, it'll bring it down. If it's too low, it'll bring it up, which is great. I love rhodiola. And then, of course, we have ashwagandha. Great for lowering cortisol, giving you an extra boost of resilience as well. Then there's L-theanine, which is also fantastic. If you're someone who feels a little anxious, this is great. I always pair L-theanine with caffeine whenever I take caffeine. I will say one thing that's helped me in my many years of gathering wisdom is reframing stress as not the enemy, but instead a catalyst for growth. If you approach it the right way by viewing stuff that comes out your way as stepping stones rather than roadblocks, you can turn stress into an opportunity to grow stronger. One book that I'd recommend everybody reads is The Obstacle is the Way. Every time something bad happens, just remind yourself the obstacle is the way. There's some fantastic examples of some real bad shit happening in that book to people and them not being fazed by it, and how your perspective can completely change how you look at situations, and what one would perceive as a significant stress doesn't affect you at all because the obstacle becomes the way. Title of the book. But yeah, I highly recommend that book. I read that 2 months ago. I'm going through it another time, is just like right now, and man, fantastic. Can't recommend it enough. And I will say, because of changing my perspective on and outlook on stress, now I'm adding far less water from emotional, psychological stress to that bucket, which can now be allocated to more sets in the gym, which is obviously a win-win. So I can still recover from my training because significantly lowered my overall allostatic load. So that's one way I try to convince you to read that book. And then the last piece of optimizing recovery, arguably the most important, is optimizing your sleep. Sleep, quite literally, foundation for everything we're working toward, whether that's building muscle, losing fat, or just feeling like a functional human being, feeling great every day, performing great. It is literally when your body repairs muscle tissue, regulates hormones, plenty of things going on with the immune system, replenishes energy stores. So no matter how perfect your training or nutrition is, or how many recovery tools you're using, if your sleep is trash, you're like shooting yourself in the foot, literally. So I did a full episode on sleep that breaks it all down in even greater detail, and I'll link that below. So I basically go over what to do by the time you wake up to the time you go to bed to optimize your sleep. But for now, just to the basics, so you can start implementing today to set ourselves up for better sleep. It all starts in the morning. First thing you want to do after your usual routine, whether that's cleaning yourself, brushing your teeth, etc. Get outside, get sun in your eyes, 10 to 20 minutes. This simple, very simple habit anchors your circadian rhythm, helping your body understand when to wake up, when to wind down. It supports your natural cortisol spike in the morning, which is a very good thing, and primes your body for more melatonin production later that night. So don't stare at the sun, obviously, but get outside for a walk if you can. I try to, first thing I wake up, drink my electrolytes, do whatever I got to do, and then get outside for a walk. Now, by midday, that's when you want to think about your caffeine intake. If you're someone who loves coffee, aim to cut it off by like 2 p.m. at the latest. I would not be taking any pre-workouts past 2 p.m. Ideally, cut your coffee off at noon because it does have a half-life around 5 to 6 hours, meaning it will still be floating around in your system when you're trying to sleep, and can take away from the quality of your sleep. Even if you feel like you're still drinking coffee at night, I'm still able to fall asleep. Your sleep quality, I promise you, is taking a hit. If you track it, you'll see that. So in the evening, we just want to start tapering your watering intake around 2 or 3 hours before bed so you can avoid waking up in the middle of the night. Also, we want to finish our last meal about 2 hours before bed. Ideally, 90 minutes is not a huge deal. However, there is some research coming out saying that having pure protein before bed can be beneficial and have no detriment to sleep quality. So I'm going to definitely have to look into that more because that's quite interesting as well. So Also, about an hour or two before bed, if you can start winding down, if your schedule allows, that'd be awesome. Avoid doing anything too stimulating. For a while, I was playing COD in the evening, and I noticed when I would play, even like half an hour, my sleep quality would take a hit. So whether I just had to get that out of there. So started watching the show. I don't want it to be anything stimulating within that hour before bed. Ideally, if you can, you really want your house to be dim as super dark. Obviously, still be able to see, but start dimming the lights about an hour before bed. If you have red light, that would be ideal. Just buy a simple red light lamp so you can still see everything but have zero blue light. If you're using screens, you got to be wearing the blue light glasses or use apps like Flux or Twilight to minimize blue light exposure, because even a small amount of blue light in the evening can suppress your body's natural melatonin production. And unfortunately, if there's lights on in your house, your skin has photoreceptors as well. That will also suppress your body's natural melatonin production. So, not ideal. Personally, I like to watch something before bed, like a movie or show, whenever. I use high quality blue light glasses from Raw Optics. They're a bit of an investment, but worth every cent in my opinion, because sleep is really what's more important than sleep at the end of the day. So if you look at it like that, it's going to dictate how you feel every day, which I mean, that's your quality of life right there. So if Raw Optics a little expensive, Amazon has plenty of affordable options that can still get the job done. I just get the ones with the tinted lenses, so not the clear ones. Those don't seem to be as effective. Now, for your sleep environment, just to quickly touch on that, think of making your bedroom a bat cave. So cool, dark, and quiet. Try to keep temperature around 18 degrees Celsius or about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. If that's not possible for whatever reason, do whatever you can to make the room cooler, whether that's using a fan, cracking a window if it's kind of cold outside, or investing in a cooling pad for your mattress, because a warm room is the enemy of good deep sleep. And then lastly, once you've checked all those boxes, of course, we can go down the supplement rabbit hole. I've tried a million different things, but you can definitely utilize a handful of supplements like magnesium, which I would consider a complete staple for absolutely everybody, apigenin, valerian root, L-theanine, ashwagandha, small doses of melatonin, which can be used to improve the time it takes you to fall asleep or kind of help set your sleep schedule. Now, in small doses, really all you need. People taking 5, 10 milligrams, it's a little high. I'd go 300 micrograms to 1 milligram. Now, that's not to say melatonin's terrible, because it's a very potent antioxidant as well. So some people do like to run that up just for the antioxidant benefits. But I find I wake up groggy anything over 1 milligram. So every day I usually go 300 micrograms. Sometimes, let's say I'm setting a new sleep schedule and I want to in that routine as fast as possible, I'd go up to 3 milligrams. But I'm mostly around that 300 microgram to 1 milligram range does the trick for me. And it's important to get it from a quality brand, because they did a study where some melatonin supplements had potentially 100x what they said on the bottle. So if you're taking one of those, you're literally sedating yourself throughout the day, which I mean, that's not ideal at all. So get a quality brand. I do have a link in the description. You can save on the ones I use, or it'll just link you to the one I use on iHerb. You could cop it from there, pretty cheap. So we've covered a lot in this episode, so I'm going to keep it there. We covered nutrition, stress management, sleep optimization, recovery tools at the beginning, and then resilience. But I do feel like it's important to take a step back and look at the big picture. Thinking back to the analogy of the bucket we discussed earlier, every stressor in your life, whether it's training, school, work, adds to that bucket. If that bucket overflows, that's when you're not just slowing your progress, but you can start to go backwards. So you can optimize every other area of your life, track your macros to the gram, nail your training program, optimize your sleep. But if you're constantly living in this go, 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 go mode, this sympathetic dominant side of your nervous system, you're kind of missing the point. Recovery is almost always about doing less rather than doing more. So when you rest, your body shifts into that parasympathetic dominant state, the rest and digest state, where growth and repair actually occurs. It's the exact opposite of the fight or flight state that most of us live in all the time. That's why sometimes the best thing you can do for your recovery is to literally just chill. Zen, kick back, watch Netflix, cuddle with your girl or guy. For some people, it might be spending an afternoon hiking. If you like nature, which nature in itself has shown to lower cortisol and actually put yourself in a parasympathetic state, which is pretty cool. They did a study where even people walked and then watched a screen in nature, and their cortisol came down, which is fascinating. So some people might just be kicking it up on the couch, but the key is just to find playing video games. The key is to find what generally relaxes you. not necessarily what's trendy or productive, some active mobility routine or more cold plunge, more recovery tools, but what feels helps you feel extremely relaxed. So, if you take one thing away from this episode, let it be this: dial in your nutrition and sleep, of course, but beyond that, just spend some time chilling, doing what relaxes you, and you'll be well on your way to optimizing your recovery. Also, if you read the book Obstacles Away by Ryan Holiday, I can guarantee you that'll take away some stress from your allostatic load for sure. So, if you're looking for more tips to level up your fitness, health, or transformation journey, check the link in the description for my free 30-day email series. I appreciate you listening, and until next time, prioritize your recovery, keep making progress. Peace.